All right. Welcome to Crushing Your Deferred MBA Applications. So I have a little bit of content prepared that I can run through, but really I want this to just be as helpful as possible for you guys. So if you want, we can kind of do a little bit of live Q&A too. I think we'll have a let's see, we got 20 or 30 people here. I know a lot of you are going to be watching the recordings. But if you stick around, we can get some of your questions answered, and yeah, you can drop questions in the chat. And yeah, I can try to answer as many questions. If you are applying this year, I would definitely recommend chatting with one of our team members just to make sure you guys are squared away. We do a bunch of calls. I take some of the calls. We have other team members that take some of the calls. Um, and you can kind of just like make sure you're on track and you find the right coach if you want to find a coach, or even just like get your questions answered. So just drop the link in the chat. But with that, let's just jump in. So yeah, we'll do a quick intro and then jump into kind of the quick overview of the deferred programs, go through some of the application process, and then do some Q&A, and we'll wrap up at 45 minutes. And yeah, we can go from there. So I'm John, CEO of Leland. I also, as I've mentioned, do coach folks through the platform. It's fun. Every employee at Leland coaches, which is awesome. Helps us kind of use the product and get closer to the customer. But before I even started Leland, I ran a deferred MBA admissions consulting firm called Deferred MBA Consulting. I own deferredmba.com. So I was kind of the first person that was really talking a lot about deferred programs. So I care a lot about this. I love helping folks like you guys apply. I've helped thousands of folks either one-on-one or through boot camps or content or other forms. So yeah, happy to primarily focused on the top 10 schools, but happy to talk about it generally as well. Other than that, I've worked at Uber, LinkedIn, curated, and then went to Stanford for my MBA. I applied back when only Harvard and Stanford offered deferred programs, and got into both, and then went to Stanford, and that's where I started Leland. So, and Leland is and I'll share a little bit about it, but and happy to answer questions about starting a company or any other things as well. I do coach folks for entrepreneurship too. But we've raised about $20 million. We help hundreds of thousands of people every year across dozens of different goals. So whether you're applying to jobs, like consulting, banking, product, or any other career path, or schools, or taking tests or whatever, we have a bunch of amazing GMAT or GRE tutors. Whatever you guys need help with, we're here to help and try to make it as affordable and accessible as possible, and do a bunch of free stuff like this. So that's kind of the quick overview of myself. I would love to get to know you a little bit. So if you could drop in the chat where you're dialing in from, if you're going to school or working, and then what your top MBA program is. If you don't mind also throwing in if you're a junior, senior, sophomore, freshman, that's also helpful just to kind of get a sense for when you're going to be applying or kind of where you're at. And thanks to everyone for turning your camera on. Good to see some of your faces. Don't be shy. All right, San Diego, graduated in December. Nice. HBS, senior, got some seniors. Nice. Senior, dream is Wharton. Junior, GSB. Nice. Okay. All right. So we got a good mix. Awesome. Well, it's good to be with you all. I'll let those continue to kind of trickle through. So as I mentioned, yeah, we're trying to build the one-stop shop for everyone to help them reach their ambitious goals that are getting more and more competitive every year. We do that through coaching, through our courses, and through content. Content is kind of the most affordable. If you haven't checked out Leland Plus, there's a lot of like sample essays, resumes, other things in there that are really valuable that coaches have contributed. I've written a lot of content, made some videos for that as well. And then we do these boot camps that are becoming really popular across a bunch of different career paths, and our team's happy to chat about it if you have questions. So I can drop the link in. It's hard to like know exactly how many, but we know that it was at least half. It might have been closer to 3/4 of deferred admits were on Leland in some capacity last year. it's a very large number. Most people that get admitted deferred have some contact with Leland, have come to events, or working with coaches. I don't know if any of you are working with a coach or went to our Deferred MBA boot camp. Feel free to drop it in the chat. Would love to hear from you and hear how your experience has been. But we love helping deferred folks. And we hope that even more of you can get in this next year. So yeah, people have lots of different backgrounds. It's everything from people going to finance, going into tech, going into consulting, going into entrepreneurship, CPG, fashion and beauty, a bunch of different categories of career paths that we've helped, and it's dozens and dozens of folks. So whether you need help with your essays or interviews or anything, we're here to help and would love to get you matched. So just to kind of give you a quick overview, I know you guys are probably familiar with deferred programs, but you apply as a senior or as a first year master's student or second year, like when your master's wraps up. If you went straight into your master's, you then defer for 2 to 5 years. Deadlines are usually in April. And the process is pretty similar to traditional business school applications, but it allows you to kind of get in early and make sure you have, you kind of get into their ecosystem. And then it gives you the chance to, go try interesting things. So you can, you take this no risk at applying, or no risk shot at applying, where if you don't get in, you've built a relationship, you've learned about the process, the school gets to know you a little bit. They're not going to ever, tell you that it was, they're not going to ever, I guess, make it a bad thing that you applied if you don't get in. They obviously want to see that you made progress against some of the things that you said you were going to do, but it's never going to hurt you to apply. They like that continued interest, even if you don't get in. Gives you some fun career options and flexibility early because you've gotten admitted. Sometimes even an early career boost. You can get to know other alumni or other students that are headed there. Fewer peers doing it, fewer people applying than normal applications. It's getting more and more competitive, but it's still, if you have your act together, it can be a really good way to stand out. You burn different social capital, meaning you use different recommenders, and than you probably would down the road. So it's a way to kind of tap into professors or, folks that you've been involved with extracurricularly or through internships, and you'll probably ask different people to do your recommendations later anyways. It's pretty low cost to apply. You kind of learn how the application process works. So there's a lot of reasons why you should apply. But really, I want to spend most of the time kind of talking about like the meat of this and how, these are some of the deadlines. So we have a couple months, but it comes fast. So don't wait. Get going now. Would love to make sure that you're not deferred candidates always procrastinate. Every time I'm working with 3 candidates right now, and I just know we're gonna procrastinate some stuff, and that's okay. You guys got a lot going on, but stay on top of it. These things take a lot longer. Like, each of these schools has anywhere from like 2 to 7 essays that you write. So it's a decent amount of work, and you want to make sure you give your recommenders the chance to really, I guess, take the time that's needed to do a good job on your recommendation. I'm actually going to drop in the chat a recommender prep doc that you can kind of, that you can use to prepare your recommenders. And yeah, to answer the question in the chat, you do need to take the test before you apply. That's a requirement. And your recommenders need to submit their recommendations before you apply. But good question. You can keep asking away. Hopefully this recommender doc is helpful. So let's go through the actual application process. There's a lot to it. You have to take the GMAT or the GRE. You can take either one. If you're struggling with the GMAT, switch to the GRE. It's often easier for folks. So don't tie yourself to the GMAT. Application strategy and kind of the narrative you're putting out to the world, super important. Recommendations, extracurriculars, awards and honors, your resume, your essays, your interviews. So we're going to go through some of these things. When you guys look at this list, what seems the most daunting to you? Drop it in the chat. Love to hear. We could spend more time on certain things that you guys feel most nervous about. GMAT, GRE, yeah, it's always a concern. Application strategy, essays, letters of rec. For me, it was letters of rec, I think. But yeah, the test is always daunting. I think that's totally fair. Yeah, we have some amazing GMAT and GRE tutors. Definitely recommend talking to them if you're struggling. We're doing a GRE boot camp right now that helps folks get going. But yeah, it can be definitely daunting to get that knocked out. Yeah, a lot of essays. Yep. Cool. These are great. Well, we're gonna run through a couple of these things. So let's talk about resume, because most people, I think, ignore the resume, and actually your resume is really, really important. It's your, it's your one pager on you. It's going to lay your foundation for your entire application, highlights your objective achievement, everything that you've done. Oftentimes it serves as like the bedrock for your MBA interview. And is your chance of just basically highlighting everything that you've done. It needs to be different than your typical recruiting resume. You have to kind of ask yourself, what do these schools care about that my job might not care about, or vice versa? So schools are obviously going to care a lot about academic achievement, or academic involvement, because they are a school, right? So they care that you were the president of your club. They care about the things that you did while you're on campus. Your job might care a little bit, but not nearly as much. They don't care about as much like your technical skill or other things. Like if you are a really good programmer, or you're really good at SQL, or you're good at Excel modeling, like those things are okay, but they matter a lot in your job recruiting. They don't matter as much to the school, because they want you to be a leader. Obviously, leadership is going to play a major role. And then it also kind of feeds into your application strategy and how you're kind of positioning yourself to be different. At the end of the day, these schools are looking for both people that are high potential and people that are different. They're looking for both. And so the more you can stand out, and the more you can kind of communicate your potential and your track record of success, that's really going to be what what will set you up. And so the application strategy kind of fuels that narrative. So for example, if you're going to an overrepresented background, like, or overrepresented career path, like consulting or finance, totally fine. You've checked the box of high potential, but you really need to check the box of how different are you? So what types of consulting projects? What's kind of the future you want? What other internships have you done that make you different from just the average person going into consulting or banking? Now, if you're going into something like a nonprofit or entrepreneurship or something a little bit more non-traditional, totally fine. So you kind of check the box of being different, but how do you show them that you're still really high potential, and that you could have done everything, but you picked this because your life purpose is to solve this problem in the world. So your resume serves to kind of communicate some of those things, and you really want it to all fit together. So we can talk more about resume if you guys have questions, but that's kind of the quick overview there. And I actually have let me see if I can find a high-level resume template. There's a bunch of resume templates that are in Leland Plus as well that you can check out. But I'll drop one in the chat as well that you can borrow. It's kind of generic, but it'll help a little bit maybe. All right. Okay. Let's talk about recommendations. I dropped the recommender prep doc in the chat as well, so you can access that. And there's kind of a lot that goes into recommendations. I actually teach a whole session on this in the bootcamp, but recommendations stressed me out a lot, because I really just wanted I wanted to control the entire process, and I couldn't control recommendations, right? They write it. Sometimes people will ask you to write it for them. I would avoid that as much as you can. The recommender prep doc is a great way for you to highlight, here are the questions that you're going to be asked. Here are some specific examples or questions that you can expect to hear. And importantly, it kind of shows them how much this process matters to you, and that they are kind of that missing piece. Because if you just walk up to someone and say, hey, will you write a recommendation for me? It's like, yeah, sure, I'm busy, I got a lot going on, but like I can whip one up. But if you come to them with this like nice document that you've clearly spent a lot of time on, and make their process super easy, it helps them know what to write. It helps them feel like they just need to execute well. Do you guys have questions on who to pick for your recommendation? Because there's often a lot of questions around that. I think a couple things to note: professors are often they're often recommenders that students like to pick, because you've been at a school, obviously. But they can be risky, because if they just talk about your like academic performance, it doesn't highlight you as a leader or as someone more than just like someone that turns in their homework on time. And so usually it's best, if you're going to pick a professor, it's nice to pick one that you've maybe had a little bit more involvement than just going to class and turning in your homework, right? So someone that you've TA'd for or had some other exposure to. The best, usually schools want at least one direct manager. But if you get that direct manager, the second one can be a little bit more extracurricular. Okay, a couple questions coming through the chat. So Should resumes be different per school? I don't think so. I think your resume should just be kind of an objective illustration of yourself. I think obviously essays would be different for each school. Should they be alumni? They don't need to be. It's much more important that they know you very, very well, and that they will pound the table for you than if they're an alumni or even someone that's important. Those things are kind of nice to have. Now, if you have options, it's great if they happen to be an alum because they can say things like, "Oh, my HBS class, Ezekiel was like, would be in the top 5%," or, I know the type of people that Booth attracts and Nom would be a really great fit, or whatever it is. So I think making sure that they know you very well, they care about your success. Those are the things that you have to have. And then, you can think about other things if you have those luxuries. What's the difference between a direct supervisor and direct report? So direct report is someone that reports to you, which you can't have. You need someone that you reported to. So that's a direct supervisor, a direct manager. In the context of internships, you might have a manager, and then you might have like an associate or someone that helps you. You can pick probably either one if they have kind of direct supervision over you and your work, because they can speak to that. But if they're too much like a peer, it might discredit them a little bit more. So you can kind of figure out. And actually, in my situation, I had someone that was sort of maybe a few years older than me, who was kind of my intern manager and was sort of supposed to help make sure I was like doing well and producing good work. But like our team manager was someone a little bit more senior. I actually ended up having them co-write the letter because they both got to see my work. You can't co-author a letter and like submit it together. So one of them just submitted it for one school and one of them submitted it for the other school, and in their name. And that was a great way to kind of capture both. But yeah, so you can kind of get creative if you want, but you're at the end of the day, you are putting in one person's name. They are writing it and submitting it from their perspective. The only reason that worked is because they both kind of had a similar perspective, and it was kind of a way for them to work on it together. Is a mentor who I've been working with for the last 2 years a good option? Yeah, I think so. I think, they need to have, so the questions they're asked are, how does this person's performance compare to their peers? So if they have a perspective on that, which sounds like they probably would, that's good. And then the second one is, what's a kind of a piece of feedback that you've given them and how did they respond? So sometimes mentors don't give you like direct feedback. Sometimes they do, but maybe it's more implicit or just kind of like something you've observed that you're trying to work on. So you can kind of get a little bit more creative with that. But mentors can be great. I think they often care deeply about you. They want your success. You want to make sure that they highlight you and your leadership and like your impact beyond just someone that they like personally. So there's some things to think about there, but that they usually can be good options. Do most applications require academic and professor recommendations or only professional? It is a good question. I will pull up something and show you. If you have other questions, you can drop them in the chat while I'm pulling this up. So, Stanford wants supervisors, which can come from work or extracurriculars. HBS wants supervisors. Wharton says college faculty, supervisor from an internship or employment, campus or community leader, advisor or coach. So they're comfortable with all sorts of different ones. Sloan says professional contact and one academic contact. So Sloan is specifically saying we want an academic contact. Most of them don't specifically come out and say that. Kellogg says professional mentor, professor, faculty. So they give you the option of a professor or faculty. Booth says one extracurricular. So extracurricular could be a professor, but it's not totally clear that that's what they want. Columbia says professor, mentor, internship supervisor, or employer. So it's flexible. Haas says professional, academic, or extracurricular. So it could be a mix. And then Darden says professional, mentor, professor, faculty, et cetera. So it can also be a little bit flexible. All this to say, like, you should go through the specific schools you're planning to apply to and make sure that your recommenders fit what they're asking. And you do that by opening the application and kind of going deep and making sure that your stuff, your selection does qualify. You might need to pick 3 and have 2 for one and 2 for the other. So you can kind of play with that a little bit. All right. Any additional questions? No. All right, we're gonna keep rolling. Is this helpful so far? We feeling good? All right. Want to make sure we get your guys' questions answered. So we talked about a lot of this stuff. They need to have a strong relationship to you. Usually one needs to be a direct manager. Ideally, they have complementary perspectives. You're not asking kind of two different or two people that observed exactly the same thing, right? The same stuff. It's nice to have kind of a multidimensional thing. And this is a really valuable thing that you guys get as deferred applicants is often you've had internships, you've had extracurricular activities, you've had, professor relationships, you've had a lot of different types of relationships. So that complementary perspective is a little bit easier than someone that's like been working at McKinsey for 4 years and like all of their work is just like in one company. So I think really lean into that and try to get those complementary perspectives. They need to be credible. It can't be your mom or like a friend. It needs to be someone that is a little bit, your senior that can talk to your performance. They need to have a willingness to write an incredible recommendation to pound the table for you. That's big. And then of course they need a genuine desire for you to succeed. Those people that like when you win, they win kind of thing where it's like, and sometimes that's actually true. Like if you were a part of a program and they want the brand of the program to be strong. And so you getting into a good school, like helps the brand look good or whatever. There's certain types of those people where the incentives just are aligned for you to be successful. And sometimes the reverse where it's like you left the company, they aren't as interested in you being successful. I picked someone that I turned down for a full-time offer and they were still really helpful. So it's not to say those relationships can't overcome that. I think that most people that are good people want you to be successful regardless, even if you don't go back to their company, but you get something to think about. And then only if you have it, you can pick the tie to the school or seniority or cloud. So that's kind of recommendations. On the essay front, there's kind of a few different types of essays that you should be thinking about. I think okay, I just got DM'd for the link to schedule a call with the team. So I'm just gonna send it to everyone. So yeah, that's the link. If you want to talk with our team about your plans, your strategy, if you want a couple hours of coaching or you want to work with someone in like a full package, you can chat with them. So the types of essays to expect, you have, personal statement types of like generic essays. What matters most to you and why? This is the Stanford essay. It's a really hard essay. Most of you are like, just trying to get a job, let alone like thinking about what matters to you. It's a very different type of like discussion and like brainstorming process. What experiences have shaped how you invest in others and how you lead? So obviously leadership is super important. Make sure your application is filled with leadership. Like nothing is as important to these schools than I just think leadership is such a scarce resource in the world. So figuring out how you lead is so important. MIT wants you to write a cover letter. Booth wants you to tell them, who you are. And then you'll get this like other bucket that's like, tell us why you want to go here. So just, why Stanford, describe your aspirations and why Stanford will help you realize them. Why do you want to go to Columbia? How will Wharton help you? So schools care about you wanting to go there, not just like submitting the same application everywhere. So they'll ask you some of those. And then there's other like behavioral prompts that are just a little bit more all over the place. Could be, tell us about a time you had a positive impact, describe the biggest commitment you've ever made, tell us about your values, all sorts of different types of questions. So it could be a lot of different stuff. And you will need to write a lot. The first version of my essays were terrible. And my mom loved them, but they were so bad. There was basically me like regurgitating my resume and it was just like so boring. You really need to think deeply about these and they're not going to get it right on the first time, but figuring out like what I like to do with my clients is I'll make a list of like, here are the five, like make a list of 5 things or maybe 5 experiences, artifacts, people, something like unique things about you that you've experienced. So more on the experience side. Make a list of 5 of those unique things, and then make a list of 5 personality traits that maybe make you unique. And some of that can help you weave together, like, what are some of the unique stories about me? Usually you are more unique than you think you are. You're used to living with yourself, so your story is just generic to you, but to other people, it might be really, really unique and special. So make sure you don't discount that. And trying to be a little bit, and this is where like, having a coach can help because you can kind of play this back to someone else and they can tell you, yeah, this is not resonating, or this is really interesting. Let's say more about this. Usually if it makes you uncomfortable, it's good content. And so figuring out like what is hard for me to talk about, what are either insecurities, what are anecdotes, what are people, what are themes that really illustrate who I am, and who I am and why that matters in the world. Because these schools want to accept people that are going to matter in the world because they want to stamp their brand on you. And this is like, the law of attraction in the world. People don't want you until you don't need them to be successful. That is true of these schools too, right? It's the same way you find a life partner. It's the same way you raise venture capital money. It's the same way you get into a good school. You do those things by being exceptional yourself, not by needing that school, that person, that firm, or whatever. And so figuring out how do you kind of position yourself as this person that's going to change the world, and making it clear to them how they fit into that, but that you're going to do that regardless is super important. Any questions on essays? You can raise your hand. You can drop it in the chat. Otherwise, we can keep rolling. Okay. So let's talk about kind of where to get started, and then we'll save a bunch. I wanted to get through this content, but I also want to save the last few minutes here. We got about 15 minutes left for Q&A. So where do you want to get started? Yeah, of course, study for the GMAT or GRE. Happy to talk a little bit more about that. I know you guys are stressed about it. I think that there's a number of different ways that you can go about this. A lot of people use tutors, a lot of people use courses, a lot of people just do self-study. It's really about knowing yourself. We obviously want you to be successful however you do it. We have a ton of amazing tutors that will help build you a custom playbook. We also have partnerships with certain places that we can send you, recommend to you. So chat with our team. We're happy to chat with you about that approach. I usually I took the GMAT and I think I should have taken the GRE. So don't get too far down the GMAT path before you at least explore the GRE. I think it's more and more people are taking it. It just seems to be a better fit for a lot of the way people learn. If you're highly quantitative, then the GMAT might be a really good fit, but the GMAT has it's a tough test, tough quant. So, take both, see what you think. Make sure you're getting involved with your community and on campus. Do this as early as you can, especially if you guys are not seniors yet. This is a great way, be involved in clubs, show them that you care. One of the things I get asked all the time is like, hey, is it good if I go and volunteer at the homeless shelter, or if I volunteer with this specific organization? Does that look good on applications? And the answer is, it depends. It depends on what you want to do in your life. So if you are saying, hey, my goal is to solve, is to work in climate and solve some of this climate change, some of these problems that our world's facing, and you volunteer at the homeless shelter. Now, that is a nice thing to do. And I'm not saying don't do service or work at, give back to people, but you can pick extracurriculars or volunteer work that supports the narrative that you are trying to put out in the world, right? So if you volunteer with a climate organization that's trying to solve climate or come up with, climate solutions for, real estate projects in your area or whatever it is, there's certain things that you can do to volunteer that strengthen and that's true of clubs on campus, and that's true of classes you volunteer, you work with, certain professors on, or research that you do. It's not enough to just be doing a bunch of things. It's helpful if you can kind of do it in, kind of based on the strategy that you're going after. Because if you claim to be interested in climate or education or whatever it is, and then you look at your resume and there's nothing on there that supports that, and you're headed to Goldman Sachs, they're going to call BS. They're going to say, hey, it's really nice that you wrote this essay about climate, but everything you've done has been for something else. And so we're going to wait and see what comes back later. So doing things to kind of build the narrative actually does matter. Okay, yeah, you joined the GRE bootcamp but a little bit late. Yeah. Okay, good question. I do think, yeah, the GRE bootcamp is great. For those of you, you can join a little bit late. I definitely think that it gives you a good foundation. I think doing additional practice problems can be helpful. There's a lot of content there, and just kind of continue to get reps. Depends on you, though. Some people can study for the GRE in a month and crush it, and others need, really intense focus. It kind of depends on, but north of 100, 120 hours studying for the GMAT or the GRE is usually what people need. With the new GMAT, yeah, so you can look at the conversions. It's about mid 600s to where you're kind of in the game, but obviously a little bit higher 600s or into the 700s is kind of closer to the average or above average. The score you need, this relates to the next question, the score you need on the test is directly related to the strength and diversity of the rest of your application. So if you have a down the fairway, not super interesting or different application, you probably need a test score and a GPA that's a little bit more competitive. If you have this crazy story of, that just highlights this amazing distance traveled and you're going to solve this problem and all these amazing things about you, you could get in with like a really low test score, like off the charts low. And so don't rule yourself out. Obviously, you can make your application more interesting as well, even if you feel more generic. But like that's where nailing your application matters so much. And a lot of people, I think, hit a point of diminishing returns on the test where they feel like, where the reality is like spending another 20 hours trying to eke out another point or two is not worth the same as like, going deep with a coach or with, friends or family or yourself and just making sure your application is super strong. So good question. And then the last things, yeah, making sure you're building relationships and kind of maintaining those with your recommenders. I usually recommend having conversations early with your potential recommenders and asking them, hey, like, I'm applying to business school. Would you be open to writing my recommendation? Not just asking them and just seeing how they react to that, because sometimes they'll say, yeah, I'm happy to. Are you sure I'm the best person? And you can kind of read like, okay, you're probably not the best person. Because they don't seem as excited. And then you'll talk to someone else and they'll say, yeah, I'd actually love to. Let me know, what the next steps are. And you can kind of get a sense for how great they're going to do versus just asking straight away and they give you a lukewarm answer. And then you have to figure out how to kind of walk that back. And then, yeah, making sure you're self-reflecting. This is an uncomfortable, different process. It also is a process that hopefully is rewarding to you, even if you don't get in. Kind of reflecting on what matters to you, reflecting on the impact you want to leave in the world, how your career fits into that. I think is valuable for all of us. It's a luxury, but it is valuable. And then making sure you're kind of building out your team of application supporters. Hopefully we can play a role of that as well. All right, let's do Q&A. And make sure that, yeah, we'll kind of wrap up. Yeah, make sure if you want, you can set up a call with the team. I'll drop that link in again. Some of you have DM'd me about it. And I'll make sure that we get that. But what questions do you guys have? Feel free to drop in the chat. Feel free to raise your hand. Would love to make sure. And then I'll also drop, we have a Leland community Slack that you can get some questions answered. I'll drop that in the chat as well. Make sure that you guys, okay, there's the Slack. We're doing a ton of free events across like tons of categories. So come to those. Like they're honestly so valuable. And we have thousands of coaches hosting events across like venture capital, private equity, deferred MBA, GMAT, GRE. So you can kind of just make sure you take advantage of that. And then, yeah, schedule a call with our team. All right. Nam, why don't you come off?
I have a question about picking my recommender. So one of them is already like my junior internship supervisor and the place I will be returned back to full time. And then I'm torn like for the second recommender, I'm torn between like my sophomore internship supervisor and like my on-campus work supervisor who can talk more about like my on-campus involvement. But I feel like the sophomore internship supervisor know me more and can talk more about my leadership in the workspace. So, what do you think?
Yeah, I think so. I'll tell you guiding principles and then you can kind of decide. I think it is really nice to have different perspectives, and one in particular that can talk about leadership, I think matters because they want to know how you influence people, why people would follow you, right? Like good leaders are scarce. And so them being able to talk about that, I think really matters. Now, I think that, strength of relationship matters a lot. And I think if you have like the junior year internship dialed, that gives you more flexibility to pick whoever you want for the other one. Because it's like, hey, this one was my direct manager. I'm going back to work with them. They can kind of speak to how I interned, how I was in a professional setting. And so it's just like it's like exactly what they're looking for. And so then having that other one be a little bit more, I don't know, like personal or just kind of highlight you in a different context, I think is valuable. But yeah, you can kind of suss it out and see what you think.
Got
Uh,
it.
Ezekiel, give me 1 second. Let me answer the question in the chat, then I'll kick it over to you. Um, so how did you deal with your stress over recommenders? I hate not being in control. Yeah, this one's hard. I mean, what I realized is that you can control it a little bit more than you think you can through the recommender prep docs and just trying to like coach them along and making sure they feel supported. Obviously, like I would highly not do not write your recommendation if you can avoid it. Like they really don't want you to do that. If the school catches that you did this, it's a real problem. Like you're usually going to get flagged and dinged right away. And if the writing of the recommendation and the essays feels too similar, they'll flag that. So it's really better if you have them write it. And so you can't control it in that sense. I also think that good recommenders will write it in a stronger way than you would about yourself. Like it's uncomfortable writing stuff like that about yourself. And so what you do is tee up this recommender doc that kind of prepares them and gives them some ideas, and then they can pull on that, and that gives you a little bit more control. All right, Ezekiel, you can come off mute and share your question.
What's up, John? It's nice to meet you. Super excited about this process. My question is about the interviews for the business schools. How do they work? What was yours like? And I also heard that they can be like 30 minutes, which seems super short to decide if someone's going to get in or not.
Yeah. So yeah, good question. And thanks for being here. So the interviews are not really the same as like a job interview where it would be like a round two. Like, okay, you made it past the first stage. Now you're at the second stage. And that's the interview stage. Really, all it is an added data point. And so that's part of the reason why they're short is like they're not necessarily determining whether you get in or not, but they are adding more context to your application. Usually schools admit 50% of the people they interview. So your chances go way up if you get an interview, which is awesome. My Stanford interview was very casual. I went to someone's office locally. It was basically like we hung out for an hour and a half. It was like, he asked me a bunch of questions that were part of this format, but he was an alum and he wasn't like as intense and it wasn't like time bound as much. My Harvard interview was like, I walked in, I said, "Hey, how's it going?" And she goes, "Good. We don't have time for small talk. We're going to jump right in." And just like started hammering me and hit me with like 30 questions in a row. And so it was a lot more intense. And I left thinking like, I have no idea how that went because it was very serious. But she had read my entire application and knew it inside and out. So each school kind of has their own style. And sometimes HBS interviews are a little bit more, maybe a little bit more friendly than maybe mine was. Thankfully it worked out, but yeah, it kind of just depends on the school. What I would say is like, if you do a good job in your application, the interview process is relatively straightforward because it's mostly about you. It's like way better. Like, you guys have all been in those interviews that are like some technical case interview or whatever, and you're just like nervous about it. Like this one's about you. There's no secrets. It's just like, tell me about you. What motivates you? Why did you do this? Why'd you do that? So it's actually a pretty enjoyable interview to prepare for. And I would say, yeah, I would almost like not even worry about it until you get those interviews because it's not too hard to prepare for them because it's just about you. Good question. And yeah, got into both. Let's see. How early would you recommend preparing for GSB essays? I would as early as you can. So usually what I like to do is I like to have my clients knock out the GMAT or the GRE as soon as they can. I know a lot of you guys are kind of racing to the finish line there. It's stressful. It's just so important. And it's hard when you're like doing that and trying to parallel process everything else. But sometimes you do have to parallel process. So that like is super important because that will not make your application, but that test score could break it. Right. And so that's like the hard part is if you don't know where it's going to land, like you probably do need to spend more time there than you do need to spend on your essays, at least initially. But it takes time to get the essay narrative going. I probably spent a month on my essays, and I'm really glad I did because like 2 weeks out was when I had kind of the light bulb moment of how my story should come together. and like the theme that was going to tie it together. The first couple weeks were just like not very good. I wasn't like making the progress that I wanted to. So you kind of need to give yourself some time rather than cramming. But I usually say give your recommenders at least a month, because you don't want to give them like a week to bang that out. Like you want it to be good, and you want them to send it to you to give them feedback too. So I think, and I usually start with the GSB essay because I think it requires a lot of introspection, and then you kind of use that for your other applications. Okay, question around on how applying as a deferred applicant is potentially better than applying in a couple years. So I think it depends a lot on the person. It's a good question. Like some of you have kind of landed a job and you figured out what you want to do. And at that point, it's sort of like a great chance for you to give yourself a shot into a process that will open up added flexibility and kind of an additional career boost, and kind of teach you about something that teach you about yourself and what matters to you. And have an amazing option to go back to school down the road. For others of you, you're like, hey, I'm racing to the finish line on like finding a job. I don't really know what I want to do. I feel like I just need to like answer some questions in my career now. And I don't feel like I'm going to be as compelling of an applicant as I will be in the future. And so you might say, hey, it's like, I'd rather wait, and do it later. I tend to think though, like it's not really an either or, it can be both, right? So if you apply early, you get the opportunity, you just get 2 shots on goal, which is just going to be better than one. Or, you could apply multiple years down the road as well. But I think, it's just an added shot, typically no risk, and gives you the chance to just see if you can get it lined up. Yeah, that's a good question though. And then, let's see. I have a private message around, kind of how, if there are discounted coaching options, and there's a lot of coaches at a bunch of different price ranges. Like we have the former admissions officers that created the Harvard 2+2 program that coach on Leland. So they are in demand. They are expensive. Of course, like they're going to charge a little bit more, but then we also have tons of really amazing alums or like younger folks that are super good coaches and don't charge nearly as much. So those can be a lot more discounted, and Leland Plus also is a lot more affordable for people. So there's some definitely good discounted options if you want. Eric, why don't you come off mute and then I can answer Vincent.
Hi.
We'll wrap it up.
Thank you. I was curious about like if you think it's worth spending some time connecting with like deferred MBA candidates like that have gone through the process and are either like on the list to like be able to be part of the school within like 2 to 5 years, or that have already like graduated. Like, do you think it's worth spending time trying to connect with those people?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. I think the more people that you talk to and learn from, the better, which, sometimes it's easy to get a hold of those people. Sometimes it's not. You can get a hold of them on Leland, which is part of the reason why we created this company, is we wanted to make sure you can able to get access to some advice. But if you can just cold message them on LinkedIn and get a call with them, that's great. I think you'll learn a lot from that. I think they can give you some tips. It doesn't usually lead to like them, having any sway in your application process. But usually if you have, that's true of also going to like the actual admissions events put on by the schools, like just getting to know the school, getting to know the students usually is helpful. It also gives you some content to write about in your application. Like a lot, it might, if you talk to a Stanford deferred admit, you might be able to quote them in your application and say, when I talked to this person who's a Stanford GSB deferred admit, they mentioned this specific resource or this thing. And that's, that kind of was impressive, that like left an impression on me or something. So it can kind of give you more content. But generally, yeah, I think the more research you do, the more relationships you build, I think the better.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Okay, last question, and then we'll wrap it up. How would you say the deferred process differs from the regular application process? So it's pretty similar. Like the actual like essays and recommendation requirements are like almost identical. So it's not the application fee is, I think, waived or much more discounted. So there's that. It's a little bit cheaper. But generally, like it's pretty similar. And so, it's not like it's going to be that much easier, or that different. And I think maybe the one thing is just like your approach might differ, right? Because with a traditional application process, they have more data to go off of. With a deferred candidate, you kind of have to get them to trust that you're on this high potential track before you've even left college. And that's hard, right? So you kind of have to figure out how you're going to prove that to them. And so your approach might be a little bit different. And then I just got one last question that was DM, just like how to navigate maybe not having a perfect job lined up yet, even if you have good internships. And that's totally, I think with this tough job market, like that's definitely a challenge for a lot of people. I mean, for one, I would say it's really, like, just to be honest, it's really hard to get into a deferred program without a clear career path. Now, that doesn't mean you can't prepare, but I think I would say like prioritizing recruiting and figuring out whatever you need, and hopefully we can help there too, can be a really important thing. And then, kind of pull the application together after that. Sometimes people will sort of pick another like career path or like a job that they don't necessarily love just to have something for the story, and then they can kind of switch jobs if they want later. But yeah, definitely make sure, because they're taking that bet on you early, it really helps if they have some data and know what you're going to be doing. They care a lot about it. So anyways, well, I hope this was helpful. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for hopping on to Leland. Hopefully you guys are excited about the process. As I mentioned, make sure you schedule a call with our team if you haven't already. Would love to be helpful in any way we can. Would also definitely would love to celebrate you once you all get into school. So make sure, and I will actually send you a congratulatory package. So make sure you shoot me an email, John@joinleland, when you get in, and I'll celebrate with you. I'll drop the link to schedule a call with the team, but if you haven't already. But yeah, make sure you let us know how we can help. We're rooting for you. It's a fun, stressful, exciting process, and you can do it. I think probably most importantly, don't tell yourself no. Let the schools tell you no. You never know what could happen. So we're rooting for you guys. Good luck with everything.